Hi, all, and welcome to the Voices of Logistics Planet podcast, where we deep dive into the world of logistics, uncovering its many layers through the voices of industry professionals. And today we have a really fascinating guest, like always, who comes from 3PL world. He has experience in account management, in sales. He is also a podcaster. He has a great podcast on logistics, and now he heads up recruitment, agent recruitment at HD Ships, if I pronounced it correctly. So, hi Matt, and thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Super excited to talk about this with you and be on the show.
Great. I think we'll have a great discussion because 3PL world in USA and in Europe are quite different beasts, I would say, because there are different payment models, different employment models. So I think those who are listening for us from Europe will be quite amazed. Okay, so let's shoot. So Matt, please share your story. How ended you ended up here? Where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So I got into sales at 19. It was my first job. I had a this is actually more popular in Europe than the U.S., but I was big into chess. I had a scholarship to play chess in college. Didn't really work out. School wasn't for me. So I needed to find a job to make money. Otherwise, I was going to have to go back to school. And I got into sales and loved it. I was living, in Indiana, working a sales job in publishing for 3, 4 years before COVID hit. When COVID hit, we had to obviously go remote. And there was talks of going back to the office once COVID, ended. And I was like, I had been a dispatcher when I was 21 briefly for a couple months. And I went back to sales because I was like, it was really fun. It was for a bus company. And you got to like move freight or not freight, but there's people and routes, but it was on demand. So you'd have to keep the on time percentage and, very analytical, was really fun. But there wasn't really much money in it. And I always had heard about, the freight broker, which I didn't know much about it. And I was like, this is kind of the perfect time to do it because I'm not going to go back to the office. I'd already moved back home. I went and did that, and yeah, I loved logistics. I found out about the agent model. I went there. Fortunately, there are um, it's the best way to say this, but I ended up not being able to do that switch. There are some legal stuff in the USA when it comes to non competes and things that I was a little bit naive about. But one thing I was able to do after that, was do recruiting, kind of for the same move I did from being a W-2 rep, which is salary plus commission into recruiting people to be straight commission where they keep 70% of the profit. Yeah, I've been doing this for about a year now. It's been fun to watch. We just had our recruiting team go up to about 6 people. Great ownership, great technology. It's been really fun working for this company.
Nice. So you heard a lot about those great stories that agents make a lot, yeah, and you just bumped into this 3PL's fault, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit. I mean, it's interesting because I mean, if you, for example, I don't know. I'm sure you guys work off the same thing in Europe, but I mean, if you're a rep who does 40K in profit a month, you may have a salary here in the U.S. 60, 70K, get 10, 15%. Where if you're an agent, yes, you don't have the salary, but getting 70% of that is about 350,000 dollars a year, in your pocket. So it's fun. There's a lot of W-2 reps who might 2, 3 times their income because if you're a good seller, often these small salary isn't really as important to you. You'd rather have a bigger piece of the profit. So yeah.
No, it's completely amazing because those in Europe, I think, as far as I know, there is always a scheme here, salary plus commissions, so and there's of course there's a cap, so I think that no one here is making 250K euros or pounds a year, so maybe this is a good opportunity for those listening for us who want to start being an agent in USA, and start developing their career there, yeah. So because I think this is possible, doing some sales or being an agent from Europe and serving USA customers through companies like yours, yeah.
It's interesting you say that. We have a one or two international reps, and we actually have one in Colombia, and they love that model because they're like
They
they
can
don't have
earn
that they
bigger
don't have that
salaries because,
model
yeah,
there either. And it's also nice because there's no a lot of other countries, the whole non-compete thing it doesn't really exist like it exists in the US. So it's a lot easier for somebody in a different country to, maybe leave their job, if they have good relationships with customers and they're already working in the US market. It's a lot easier to, transition customers and go be an agent.
nice. So someone reading, listening to us, there's a great opportunity here. Yeah. So good. So Matt, let's go to, I think you already, got employed a lot of agents, recruited a lot of agents, So I think, some are successful, some aren't, So what do you think? What are the key characteristics when you are looking for someone to work in freight, as an agent? What are the key traits which you actually know that, this guy or girl will be successful? Do you see some traits here?
Yeah, that's a great point because there are people who I would not recommend, to be an agent. If you're not if you're not selling at a good level on a salary plus commission job, it doesn't really make sense to be an agent because often, you know, you may need that salary, and you aren't getting paid, as an agent unless you're selling. So I think you also have to be independent to a level. So a lot of W-2 reps love this who are independent when they become an agent. Because at a W-2, they may have a manager saying you need to make 80 phone calls a day. If all your work is done at 3 o'clock, well, office hours are till 5, so you can't leave till 5. Or they may tell you how to manage your account or how to manage that relationship. Whereas an agent, you still get the same support with, the technology, load boards, vetting services, carrier overrides, support, insurance, for your customers, but you don't have the manager, you don't have the boss. And that can be a good or bad thing. Some W-2 reps love that, but if you're not somebody who can like self motivate yourself to sell and get something done, then probably it's not going to work out too well as an agent.
Yeah, so good points here, because I know I'm in sales. Many who are in sales understands that it takes time, So I don't know how long does it take some, but exactly, in logistics, I know that's the same in Europe. It's the same. I think it's the same in USA. The sales cycles can become quite tricky. Yeah, so it can take, I don't know, from 3 to 6 or even more months until you get something moving. Yeah, so, and from your experience, what is the percentage of new freight agents that become successful and and it makes it past the first year? Do you have some calculations here?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would say actually it depends on the situation. So there's some reps that, they don't have a non-compete, they don't have a non-solicit, they're coming over from a different program, they have relationships with their customers already. And that's a pretty seamless transition, because they're making money right away. But there are agents who start over with very small books of
Yeah,
business or
or
no book
zero. Let's say,
or
I just want.
zero. Yeah, and the reality of that is, and I think, you know, I it's fair to be honest on both sides because the reality of that is about 80% of people who probably, I would guess 75, 80% who do that as an agent don't make it for the exact reason that you said. It takes 3 to 6 months and you're not getting that salary to fall back on. So I always encourage somebody, if make sure if you're starting over with no book that you have that financial, backing to be able to do that for a period of time, or wait to be an agent. Because like you said, it's not an easy freight market in the USA right now, and it is a longer sales cycle. So it's much easier transition for people who are already agents or they don't have a non-compete. They don't have a non-solicit. They're able to just transfer customers over with them. They already have relationships and they're making money from day one. Um, but if you're not, it can be more difficult. I think you also see some people who try to, and we don't really, encourage this anymore. But we've seen some people try like this. It's not really a part time thing either, which is also, yeah. But
I saw, some earlier, some ads on YouTube, just saying, come to USA from abroad, work and as an agent, from zero to hero, easy peasy. Yeah, and this is not the thing. Yeah, if you want to start from ground, it will take, I think a year if you don't have any knowledge, so it's a year as a minimum. Yeah, would you
Yeah,
say
and
this
it
is
depends
correct?
on the market too. I mean, I always said when I was a broker, I got pretty lucky with some accounts pretty quickly, but it was also a different freight market back then. It was a lot easier to sell in 2022 than it is right now, and than it has been 2025, 2024. The market's a lot more difficult in the U.S.
Okay, so let's talk about money. I think this is very important for everyone. So you already mentioned, some ranges of, what freight agent can expect to earn. But what stories do you hear in the market? What's is are the minimum ranges, and what's are the top producers, top agents? What can expect to make there?
Yeah, so I mean, there are agents out there. I mean, you'll see people, like John Rogers, for example, on
Yeah,
LinkedIn
I
posts
follow
there.
him.
Yeah, are making in the millions. I would say probably the average agent though is probably I so we're still relative. We have about 30 agents, so we might not be the one to compare it to. But I think about an agent program that's been around for. There's one that comes to mind that's been around for about 15 years. I think the average agent there makes about 160,000. So there's people that are making 700, 800, in the millions because some try to scale their business. So say because if you're a one person, there's only so much you can do yourself. So you can as an agent owner, if you get too busy, you can hire someone to work for you, and the agency still pays for all their technology, does all their billing, everything, but you pay them directly out of your 70%. So a lot of people
Okay.
do that to scale as well. But then there's a lot of people who don't want to do that. They just want to be a one man show. If they're making 200,000, 300,000, they're totally happy. They do not want to scale their business. And that's totally fine too. That's the fun part about being an agent. I mean, it's your business. So however you want to do it, however you see fit, basically.
Yeah, it's really good. But no, doesn't it make sense if you're running a 300K, and doesn't it make sense to just, open your own freight brokerage?
It's a great question. So the difficulty you see, I don't know how it works in Europe, is generally the first year in the U.S. is a carrier will not want to work with you at all.
They're
You're going to
afraid,
have
yeah?
to prepay the carrier. You have bad credit, so you're going to need a lot of capital for that. The number two thing would be all the technology. So, I mean, for example, we have proprietary tracking, proprietary TMS. We're paying for all the load boards, all the everything like that. Um, and then obviously all the billing is done too. So um, there's no non competes or no non solicits. So, but I'd encourage somebody if they're wanting to own their own brokerage someday is to start as an agent. Build your business up to 300K in GP plus, and then maybe look at it. Just because it's so difficult the first year, and then there's so many other costs too. Also, the liability for having insurance if a claim happens, things of that nature. So you see some big companies in the U.S. that are never go to their own brokerage; they just become big agencies, $100 million agencies. Um, and they never go. But then you see other people that go to their MC. So it really just depends. If you obviously have your own company, you're having to focus on all that other stuff: insurance, claims, technology, paying carriers, billing. Whereas as an agent, kind of one of the benefit of is if you just want to focus on sales and have everything else taken care of for you, then you can do that.
Yeah, good points here. And a lot to consider. So it's everything has its pluses and minuses. And if let's say I want to start being an agent, yeah, I just need to ring Matt, or and they sign some contract, and they can do this right away, or there are some onboarding, some screening processes. How does this look like?
Yeah, that's the fun part about agent recruiting. It's a pretty fast turnaround time. So, someone, we have a conversation with someone. They usually want to see our technology. Sometimes they obviously want to talk to their family, maybe talk to their customers. You'll go through that whole process. So, I'd say the average agent probably takes 4 to 6 weeks to decide to come on. But once they decide to come on, it's about a 24 to 48 hour onboarding process. So it's very quick. It's not like In the US, a lot of like W-2 positions, salary plus commission, they have like training class like once a month. You have to start on this day. An agent could sign today and get set up in 24 to 48 hours. They could sign Friday. They could sign next Tuesday. They could sign on June 7th. Really, whenever it makes sense for them, and then they can get onboarded very quickly. Another thing to mention is they get paid very quickly too. I don't know how it is in Europe, but as a W 2 salary plus commission, you're often waiting a month and a half for your commissions, or you're waiting until the customer pays. Nice thing as an agent is you get paid weekly on POD. You don't have to wait until the customer pays. You don't have to wait until the following month. So whatever you do Friday to Thursday, as long as you have the POD in, you get paid the following Friday, which a lot of agents like getting their money quickly, as well as they get it a lot more quicker than a salary plus commission position.
Friday, salary in. Let's go to a pub. Yeah, that's good. Nice. So okay, so we touched a lot, and so let's say I think you've seen a lot of also failed agents, and we talked about some things what separates the good ones from the bad ones. So those who are failing, is it really related with just they don't have some scale skills, or there are some other reasons why they're failing? Maybe they doing some bad things, or with customers, I don't know.
Yeah, I think some of it is sales skills. I also think some of it is maybe difficulty with independence. They don't have, when you're an agent, you're working from your house, maybe they're not putting the same level of effort in. They're not used to, there's no boss or someone telling them they have to make this many phone calls, or pushing them, which is good for a lot of independent sellers who don't need that. But there are some people who I think sign up as an agent and then they, have trouble motivating themselves to, to grind, to make calls, do emails, things like that. I think some of it sales skills, so that probably a mix of those two things, I would say. And there's some
Time
people
management
too
and
who,
sales skills,
yeah, there's some people too who thought their relationships were stronger. I mean, logistics, I always say, and everyone says a relationship business. There's some people who think their customers are going to follow them from, XYZ, and they don't follow them. Well, their plan, if they had this customer follow them, they would be making 100, 150,000 as an agent. Now the customer didn't follow them and they're making zero. So now they need to go, find another gig. Because so yeah, I mean, there's several reasons, I would say. The good thing is, you know, I haven't had since last May an agent who's moved at least 5 shipments, who's like, got a customer, go back and leave. But I've had plenty of agents just not being able to get going, which is why those first, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months are, so important.
Okay, nice. So yeah, so and those situations are, do you see they often, when customers do not move with agents? Is this an rule of thumb, or just
Oh, that's an interesting conversation because I think a lot of my counterparts in recruiting, say that, books of business are never transferable, this, because there's people who recruit in this industry that recruit people from a W-2, a salary plus commission job, to another salary plus commission job. And what often happens is, I shouldn't say often, what sometimes can happen is the person can demand a high salary, exaggerate their book of business and their skill level. And then the company finds out and they're like, well, then they let the person go. And then it kind of gets this theory that no books of business are transferable. But I think the best reps who have the best relationships are a lot more motivated to transfer to the agent route because they're getting 70% of the profit. So the ones who have the relationships, and they want to really make sure you have strong relationships because, like you said, if they don't transfer or you can't sell, you're not making any money. But there are still stuff that are out of control. I wouldn't say all books transfer, but I would say more books transfer than people think transfer would be probably my
okay?
answer to that.
Yeah, good answer. So good. And talking about the commission model, as I said, in Europe there aren't a lot of commission based models in freight forwarding. It's always base plus salary, and hearing from all the coming from the some talks from the tech side, saying you need just good base salary, no commissions here. And do you think is this still working, or maybe there's a shift more towards base plus commissions model, or this or still the kind of commission model is better?
I think you're probably seeing more of a shift lately to the commission model. Now the salary plus commission is still much bigger, but there's some big companies. I'll give you an example. Armstrong, Trinity, they're both billion-dollar companies in the US logistics industry. They have massive commission models, and there's some companies that have both models now, commission only or they have a W-2 side with commission plus. I think the reason you might be seeing this is me, I don't have any facts to support this, but I think maybe we're seeing kind of a shift in just the generations, where a lot of Gen Z and some of these young up and coming people, they want to be more independent. They want to find the ability to travel, to not have a boss, to find kind of like purpose in what they're doing. So I think, and there's more awareness to it. Talking to people who have been in the commission only world, LinkedIn wasn't what it was 10 years ago. It was a lot harder for salary plus commission people to find out that this was an option to go commission only. There wasn't as much awareness. There wasn't as many companies that did the commission only model as there are now. Um, so I would say it's growing a little bit in popularity in the U.S.
Good. So time flies, So, Matt, just to conclude our great conversation, what advice could you give someone considering becoming an agent? And what should they pay attention, when when they're choosing a freight brokerage, a 3PL to partner with?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I mean, you brought up an earlier point earlier about why not just open your own authority, and there are some agent programs that I think if you go to, you might as well open up your own authority. A big thing to look for is liability with claims. If a customer goes out of business, there are some agent programs where that gets pushed on the agent. That can bankrupt an agent. I talked to an agent a while back who signed with the program. A customer go out of business, bankrupt for 200,000. Now he has to pay that back. Uh, that's not the way at the agent program I'm at. Same way with some other ones. So those are some really important questions to ask. But take your time. I think would be the biggest thing. There's no rush to be an agent. It's always going to be there. So take your time to talk to family members, talk to customers, talk to different agent programs, talk to current agents. Kind of a real grasp of anything. It shouldn't be a rushed decision.
Okay, good. And I will add some from my one advice from myself. Invest in training, in sales training, in sales skills and conversation skills, relationship building skills, because this is one of the top skills that you can have as an agent and just as a person. Yeah.
100%. Um, yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun kind of going through the agent model and talking through it and kind of learning a little bit. I know pre-show we were talking about kind of how it is in Europe, so I learned some things myself. So thanks again for inviting me.
Good, good. Thank you, Matt, for you, Excel, for sharing your great, journey, and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in for this episode, and we hope you enjoyed this today. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this episode. Thank you, and bye bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Matt.